CBS News exit polling found that the economy was one of the top issues that drove voters to the polls this election. One voter, a Pennsylvania restaurant owner, spoke to 60 Minutes about why she cast her ballot for President-elect Trump.
My mother used to always say, gotta vote Democrat, they're for the poor people.
You grew up in a Democratic household?
Yes.
But you just voted for Donald Trump?
Yes.
Inflation is down by more than half. Interest rates are falling, mortgage rates are falling, wages are going up. Are you not feeling that?
I don't feel it.
Let's bring in our political panel, Joel Payne and Lance Trover. Joel is a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist. Lance, as you all know, is a Republican strategist who served as a spokesperson for North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum's presidential campaign. Doug Burgum is someone who's being mentioned as possible pick for a Trump administration role. Any update on Governor Burgum?
I wish I could break some news here with you tonight. That'd be a lot of fun. Nothing new. Look, I think Doug fits the mold of somebody that Donald Trump would like. I mean, this is a guy who came from a small town, started a company with just 10 people, built it into an international business. I know he recently met with Bibi Netanyahu, so he has that type of international business acumen that somebody like Donald Trump likes. But has also been the governor of the second largest energy producing state here in America. And I mean, he knows what it's like to work under the Obama, the Trump and the Biden administrations. I think he can speak to that. And I think he meets that type of qualification that if Donald Trump's looking for somebody of quality and character, then Doug Burgum fits the mold for sure.
What do you believe Democrats are going to do as they handle these Trump appointments? On some level, you have controversial picks like Stephen Miller, who's been criticized by many Democrats for his views on immigration and his policy positions. At the same time, if Doug Burgum, the North Dakota governor, or others of his ilk who are Trump allies but are popular with the business community, energy CEOs and Wall Street people, how are Democrats going to handle the mixed bag of personalities and profiles that are likely going to come into this administration?
I think Democrats are going to have to pick their battles. I don't think that Democrats can run an aggressive campaign against every member of the Trump cabinet, the heretofore Trump cabinet. I do think that there might be some folks who are particularly grotesque. Stephen Miller, some of his public statements, some of the things that he's created in terms of liabilities, those are going to be things that Donald Trump has to carry around. Tom Homan, similarly, he was just on 60 Minutes 2 weeks ago saying very controversial things about what an immigration policy would be. But I don't know if Democrats are focused on fighting every single Trump offense. Here's what I would say also, Bob. I think Democrats this time around, the resistance, so to speak, is going to look and feel a little bit different. I think Democrats are going to have to get away from fighting Donald Trump on everything he says and focus on what he does. The American people have somewhat weighed a verdict on Donald Trump, his words, his rhetoric, and generally speaking, it's that it does not impact the American people as much as maybe Democrats want them to. So I think now Democrats have to be focused on, okay, let's have a real conversation about what you want to do in your agenda. And I think that's how Democrats are going to have to approach this cycle.
You mentioned Tom Homan being on 60 Minutes. Let's watch Mr. Homan on 60 Minutes.
I hear a lot of people say, the talk of a mass deportation is racist. It's threatening to the immigrant community. It's not threatening to the immigrant community. It should be threatening to the illegal immigrant community. But on the heels of historic illegal immigration crisis, that has to be done.
Lance, when you look at the Trump administration, they've made this pledge, whether it's on 60 Minutes with Homan or President-elect Trump constantly on the trail, they're moving forward with mass deportations. As a political strategist, how do you see the possible fallout for this policy implementation on the horizon and how Republicans are perhaps going to handle it?
I go back to the campaign, and I think this gets kind of missed out there. First off, the issue of immigration was always the #2 consistently issue in this country. Donald Trump led by double digits on almost every single poll. There were two different polls that came out that showed at least 55% of the country actually supported mass deportations. That included some independents and Democrats. I think they're smart talking about going after the worst of the worst first, right? We need to go after the people who have committed crimes, the thugs and racists and whoever else that Donald Trump and how he describes them. I think you start with that, and that is the beginning, and you go forward. I think also in that interview, he talked about this taking a lot of time. So this is not like we're going to be January 21st and there's going to be millions of people kicked out of this country. I think you start that like they do. They start with the criminals, the ones. We've also looked at in 10 to 12 million illegal immigrants came into this country just over the course of the last 3 years. So these aren't folks who just have been here working and stuff like that for a long time and working and doing all these other things. These are people who have come in here just illegally just in the last couple of years and set up shop.
Yeah, I think this is all about how you read the mandate, right? And I'm very curious what Donald Trump and his inner circle read their mandate is. If they think their mandate is fighting culture wars, is doing very extreme things that I'd imagine a lot of folks in their coalition either are neutral on or maybe not supportive of, then yeah, sure, go wild. I don't think that's actually what Donald Trump was elected for last week. He was elected because of economic anxiety. So if Donald Trump wants to focus on economic anxiety, you know it's inflationary, sending a bunch of folks who out of this country illegally by deporting them. That's inflationary. You know it's inflationary? Tariff policy that works against the American people and the American workers' interests. And those are the types of things that I think Democrats are going to have to hold Donald Trump accountable on. Again, more what he does, less what he says.
With Elise Stefanik as the possible UN ambassador for the United States, what are we seeing? Are we seeing America first, non-interventionist foreign policy? She is a combative personality at times during congressional hearings. What do you expect from her should she make it to New York City and serve as the U.S. ambassador?
I think this was a terrific choice by him, and I think the Trump mantra is peace through strength, and that's what he's been talking about. The one area where I think if you're Israel, you're very pleased with this pick, because if anybody's been a leader on the Israel issue and the anti-Semitic protests on campus, it's been Elise Stefanik through her time on the Education and Workforce Committee. So I think we will see a bigger focus on helping Israel and being a supporting mechanism for them.
What do you make of Stefanik?
I'd imagine that there are folks who feel good about that, as Lance just detailed. There's also a lot of folks from a Muslim background, from Middle Eastern background, who are very troubled, frankly, by how Republicans demagogued on this issue around Gaza the last cycle. Donald Trump won, the majority of vote in a place like Dearborn. I'd imagine those voters want someone who is going to apply some balance to how to bring to peace the situation in Gaza. Elise Stefanik certainly put some overheated rhetoric up, did not necessarily show herself to be the type of leader to bring people together. So we'll see. Again, this is the type of baggage. So look, the campaigning is easy, right? Now it's time for Donald Trump to govern, and he's making picks about who's going to help him govern, and he's to be judged on that.
What are you watching down there in Mar-a-Lago?
I think the process here is what I'm watching play out, and it's much different than what we saw 8 years ago. Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita ran a phenomenal campaign. It was very disciplined. It was very methodic. I feel like we're seeing the same thing play out here with these announcements as they come out. She is clearly in charge, and I think it sent a very good message that she's going to be White House Chief of Staff to a lot of folks on the Hill and here in town.
What was that message?
That somebody who is bringing some discipline and some strategy and some leveling the field here to get this thing moving forward. And I think we just talked about it earlier here on the show, and keeping some of these other folks out who may have been a little bit of the troublemakers.
Best of luck to Susie Wild. I'll just say this. Talking to a lot of Democrats I'm talking to, Bob, one thing that Democrats, I think, are also focusing on is, have we been thinking about Donald Trump the wrong way? We kind of treat him as this thing that exists outside of politics. Donald Trump is the two-time now Republican president of the United States. And he's as Republican and as normal as George W. Bush, as John McCain, as Mitt Romney. That means he wants to give tax breaks to the wealthy and the well-connected. That means he wants to go after the ACA. All the things that Republicans do that people don't like, unpopular policy picks. Donald Trump is essentially that. He is not something that's different. He's not something that's offbeat or counterculture. He is a mainstream Republican with very unpopular mainstream Republican ideas. And I think he's going to be combated that way.
He could be hard to predict. He's hard to predict in the sense that you have Donald Trump Jr., Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk. There's a different kind of orbit around Trump. 2016 transition, a lot of traditional Republicans, and certainly Trump still backs many traditional Republican policies. But how do you see this new orbit around Trump?
Oh, look, there's new people, there's old people. I mean, that's what puts together a good administration. I'm not concerned about it at all. Again, I go back to the Susie Wiles pick is clearly one of disciplined approach that came with the campaign. We can argue all day long about whether he was disciplined in his rhetoric and not, but in terms of the operation of that campaign, anybody, Democratic or Republican, would tell you it was the best run campaign he's had in the 3 times that he's run. I suspect we will see more of this, and they're putting people out there. Lee Zeldin out there today is the EPA administrator. Elise Stefanik. These are quality people. They're not,
I know we
not
gotta
on
go.
the fringe.
I wonder how Elon Musk and these wealthy oligarchs who are around Donald Trump are going to wear after 6 months or a year.
With Trump or with the American
with
people?
the American people who Donald Trump is bringing to power, the cronyism that he's bringing to the White House. I really do wonder how that's going to wear in 6 months or a year from now.
Elon was there during the campaign.
We'll see what happens. You never know with President-elect Trump. I've covered him for a while. You never know. Joel Payne, Lance Trover, thank you.